So we saw on Saturday that Max Fried made his final rehab start, which turned out to be it's going to be his final rehab start for the club, and it looks like he's going to join the club in Chicago as we get toward the weekend, right? So not a moment too soon for Max Fried to return. Now, one is there haven't been very many left-handed starts by Braves pitching this year. We haven't really seen anybody consistently nail down spots from the left-handed side. There's been blips and bloops and different things like that, but from a consistency standpoint, we haven't seen a whole lot of left-handed starting pitching. But, whereas we saw over the weekend that the Texas Rangers are getting Max Scherzer, right, and whatever banged up, beat up form that they've got, they've got Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, and they could add me on there to get as many starts out of all of that. But anyway, that's a whole nother separate side issue. But getting Max Fried is like dropping in an ace right in the middle of your rotation, right? And we know how good Max Fried is. Look, I brag about the fact that Max Fried, I do believe, is the best left-handed pitcher in baseball. I think he's the most consistent left-hander in baseball. He's maybe not been as dynamic as Clayton Kershaw, obviously, at times. Kershaw's been a monster. But in the year of our Lord, July 31st of 2023, I think Max Fried is the best left-hander in the game today. Consistent, obviously. He can get you some innings, obviously, and he can strike out guys. Again, maybe not at a crazy clip like a Max Scherzer does, or a Spencer Strider does. But again, he's a good strikeout pitcher. But this is a real shot in the arm as we're trying to figure out what the rotation has been, right? I mean, it's been Elder, it's been Strider, and it's been Morton. And that's been the three bedrocks of this rotation this year. Literally feels like for the entire season, that's been the only three things that you've been able to count on is those three guys in the rotation. And as those guys have had, again, Elder had some issues here. Morton's been beat up a little bit. Strider's given up, a few runs. You feel like the idea of throwing Max Fried into this rotation is just the elixir that this team needs. And I keep going back and forth about whether or not the Braves are going to add another starter to their rotation. Because if you have the four guys, as we've explained on the show, if you have four guys, you feel like you can make your way through that fifth starter spot, right? You can use your rookies. You can use Schuster and guys like that, to fill in those roles. Or if you need a bullpen game every so often, you feel like you can find your way to get through all of that. But when you have two starters that are out, you can't fake it till you make it at that point. You've got to have somebody that nails down one of those spots and can give you some consistent innings. And we were hoping that Michael Soroka would be that guy, that he could be the guy that would come in here and just handle business, and, he would be back on track and he could find a way to find a spot in this rotation, but that hasn't happened yet. So we're kind of, living with those three and then finding solutions on how to get through these other two spots out there. Now with Max Fried back, it feels like that this is a big-time acquisition for this club. If he can eat up some innings again, and we don't know what Max Fried is going to be ultimately at the end of the day. Can he be the guy that we've seen over the last few years, right? Where he's been, a really good, he's been their ace. He's been an ace for this team, and he's pitched really well. And maybe Strider has taken over that role now as far as the ace goes, but Max Fried is certainly a valuable part of what this rotation is going to be. And certainly come playoff baseball, we want to see Max Fried be healthy. Again, Max Fried was dealing with flu viruses or whatever it was, stomach ailments or whatever he had, going into the playoffs or whatever like that this year or last year, I should say. And we didn't really see much of Max Fried. And then Strider obviously trying to come back from injury. He was hurt, and just it did not work out very well for the Braves rotation. So the more guys that they can get back on deck and the more guys that they can get mixed into this rotation, hopefully at some point Kyle Wright's going to find his way back before we get to September. Again, if they decide that they want to add a starter at the deadline, I got no problem with that. I have no problem with adding more starting pitching because, again, as we've seen, There's no such thing as too much starting pitching for this team. And we have bigger fish to fry than where the division is right now. I mean, with all due respect, as we've talked about the division being over, now it's 11 and a half games, 12 over the Phillies, 18 over the Mets. I mean, again, this division is just running away from itself. We've got bigger fish to fry than just what the division is. Now we have to start thinking about playoff baseball. And Max Fried is certainly going to be a big key to that. And he's going to be a huge asset and a huge piece to all of this. But this is all good news. And it looks like that, again, not a moment too soon, that Max Fried is going to find his way back into the starting rotation. And he'll probably join the club this weekend, this next weekend coming up here in Chicago to take on the Cubs and get himself back in. And if he can get back to any kind of the form that we've seen, and again, we'll take it start by start by start. And I definitely don't think that we're going to see him on the Partridge Family bus on trips to Buford and Smyrna and on the way back. I think once he's up here, he's here to stay. And obviously that, again, if he doesn't need any more rehab, he made his 4th rehab start. He got himself up to 79 pitches. That's all good news. Now come into Chicago, eat up some innings, and let's see what we can do from there. And let's see if the Braves add a starter today. And again, you can't have too much starting pitching right now. Hopefully that this is not the bugaboo that has been last year when we got into playoff time. Hopefully that this becomes a strength of ours as the season progresses and moves along. All right, as you listen in to Hittin' Hard, let us know that you're an everyday listener to the program. So we call them our everydayers. So we want you to let us know on whatever podcast platform that you listen on that you're an everyday listener to the show. So we thank you so much for being a part of our growing community, but let us know that you're an everydayer to the program.